Alright guys, different kind of reaction for you today. We have Tim Pool, the full interview with John Stossel. I don't know if you know who John Stossel is, but he's like the OG street
What is
reporter,
the
I
real
guess.
story of January 6th? Many people have asked that question.
The real
Some people
story is
The news you're getting comes straight
not allowed to be talked about, I don't think, on YouTube. So we'll just leave that. We'll leave that where it's at. Alright guys, let's see what quality we got here. 1080p, okay. This is 17 minutes or something. Oh no, 24 minutes. I personally, I watch everything in double speed because people talk too slow and things take too long. But my wife can't understand it, so I assume a lot of people can't understand it. So we're gonna go at least 1.25. If you guys aren't weak and you can go faster when I do longer videos like this, let me know. But for now, we're gonna go 1.25 and see what Stossel has to talk about with old Beanie Boy.
from me and straight from the source on the ground.
That's the first time I've been fired at.
Tim Pool's a very successful reporter. He has millions of subscribers. Yet Pool never went to journalism school or even college. He didn't finish high school, and he doesn't work for a news network. Pool became a respected reporter just by doing it, going there and covering things the mainstream media miss. He's reported from global hotspots.
You do have to give Tim Pool credit for that, though, because he just went out and did it. So you have to respect a man that just goes out and does it, builds something, creates something, does what he has to do to get it done. And he did go to some sketchy ass places for sure. So this is kind of cool to look into because I've heard all these things about him before, but I've never seen any of the video of him or, you know, any of this older footage. I'm trying to stop looking over here where the stream is streaming and look over here where the camera is, but it's in my peripheral. We're blocking peripheral block.
From riots, he's exposed media bias. I did a short video with Pool about citizen journalists like him, but his story's surprising and deserves more time, so here it is.
You're an action junkie.
I used to be. I used to travel all over the world, 2 flights per week. You know, it's not so much the action, but kind of, you know, definitely an adrenaline junkie. I've been skateboarding my whole life. But it was more so, I want to know why things are happening.
You gotta respect him for skateboarding,
didn't really
too.
care if I told people what was happening. I wanted to
love
watch
skateboarding.
it. So I knew. Because, you know, some people don't trust the media. I don't know who to believe. Why don't I just go there? I can see for myself. And then it turns out there's one good way to fund that. Tell people what you saw.
People started to watch, and you've gathered followers, and you're supporting it.
Oh, before I get a bunch of cap comments about me loving skateboarding because I'm a 40-year-old white dude with a beard. Hold on. I think my board's even right here. Yep. Yeah, we're riding a creature on Independence these days. Mob grip as always. If you don't ride mob grip, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know who you are.
Yourself doing this.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I feel like I've kind of followed a traditional track, maybe a little faster than most journalists, where now I'm kind of just anchoring. I still do periodically on-the-ground stuff, travel every so often. I used to be on 2 flights a week. Now I'm on, you know, a flight every other month. So it's much more behind-the-scenes political commentary, anchoring type stuff.
How dare you call yourself a journalist, Tim Pool? How dare you call yourself a journalist?
How dare you? Why are you
How
there?
dare you?
There was a protest, there was a speaker, and I decided to go down and just cover the story, something I typically do when people are protesting things, to see why are you protesting, why are you here? That's the funny thing, you asked, you know, people were saying, how dare you call yourself a journalist? I didn't. I went to Occupy Wall Street because I was a hacker, and my buddies were hackers, and you know, they're working on code to try and help people communicate in protests. And I said, well, I'm not a coder. I'll go down and just film and show what's happening. And then all of a sudden these journalists were like, you're a great journalist, Tim. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not. And they're like, you are. And so here I am today. But now, these same activists who used to praise me, this is the really funny thing, it comes and goes in waves. When I showed up to Occupy Wall Street and I said, the police just whacked that protester, they say, thank you, Tim, for telling the truth. A month later, the protester deflates the tires on a car, and I say, that protester is, just draining the tire on the car, and they say, how dare you turn on us?
I like it that you're a high school dropout.
Yeah, me too.
Why? Why do you like it?
Shout out high school dropouts, bro. I'm with you. I'm a high school dropout myself. I just retired from my first career at 40, 22 years in insurance, and now I'm trying to stay home. I still got little ones, so I'd like to be there for these ones more. But shout out high school dropouts. I don't know why the delay. Let's go.
I don't really think about it, but when I was I always challenged authority because I don't believe in arbitrary authority. I'll respect you if you're a doctor and you tell me to put pressure on it when I'm not going to question you. I'm going to say, okay, you're a doctor. But when the teacher would come to me and tell me I had to do this a certain way, I'd say, explain it to me, and they couldn't. So this really became a problem for me when they would be like, here's the formula for a math problem. Okay, I can do it in my head. Well, no, I don't want you to. I want you to do it my way. No, I'm not going to. You're wasting my time. And I have maybe it's something that's a part of me, but ultimately, when I was in high school for about 2 months before I said, these people have no idea what they're doing. They're wasting my time, and I can go spend my time on the internet and learn faster than they could ever tell me.
Is college a waste of time too?
Yeah, 100%, absolutely.
100%.
Look, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a scientist, if you want to be a lawyer, there are some things you have to go to school for. But most people,
Correct.
It blows my mind when I hear people
Engineer.
going to school for like business management. I'm like, come on, man, just go start a business.
Yeah.
Go talk to an accountant and get the ball rolling.
Widespread condemnation tied to Covington Catholic High School and some of its students.
Covington got you know.
When the Covington situation happened, I had no idea what was going on. People were sending me emails like, you got to cover this story. This is
That's
huge.
the best. That was horrible when that happened to him, but homeboy's set for life now. Set for life. And a hero to many in the red hat.
I watch this video and I'm like, there's two people standing in front of each other. There's no context. Why is this newsworthy? It's not. So I ignored it.
Don't get me wrong, I don't think he's a hero. All he did was stand there confused why this crazy Indian is going crazy in his face. But they did try to throw him under the bus, that's for sure. And he made him pay. So shout out
Twitter was saying,
shout
look,
out
the white
Covington
upper
boys.
class guy is sneering at the minority.
You've got to view the world through a particular lens to think that. And that's why I think that journalism today is just complete utter garbage. All of these big news outlets, even the Washington Post, CNN, they immediately made the assumption he must be a racist sneering at this Native American man. I didn't make that assumption because I'm not a racist. I said I have no idea what this is. I just see a guy banging a drum and a kid with a weird look on his face. So
Yeah.
I looked at some other videos, and it turns out very quickly, as soon as the story emerged, I saw Nathan Phillips walk up to Nicholas Sandman and said, "What's the big deal?" Native American walked up to a kid.
And once there were a bunch of like Hebrew Israelites or something yelling all kinds of racist shit at these kids because they're the white devil and journalism botched on a whole different level on this one.
Kid banged his drum and then left, but no one else watched the video.
How could that be? The videos are all over. Everybody's talking about this. No one watched the longer video?
Nope. It's this phenomenon that's been happening on Twitter. Because I learned this when I worked for Vice, when I worked for Fusion. The journalists all follow each other.
Cut
so
it.
it's this big
Edit.
game of telephone on
Share
Twitter.
it.
In fact, Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, said on the Joe Rogan podcast in 2016, all of the left-leaning journalists were following each other, but conservative journalists were following everyone. So they only follow each other. So here's what happens. One left-wing journalist says, look at this racist. His buddy sees it and says, wow, look at this racist. And then it's a big old circular game of telephone where no one actually does any fact-checking. And then New York Times, Washington Post, CNN all publish the same fake story. And now they're getting sued for it.
They eventually corrected it. Did they thank you?
They didn't thank me.
Oh, they got
I don't
sued
know,
for it,
for some
alright.
reason I kind of, I got around 500,000 views on that one video, which was, immediately after the story came out, I put together a video. The initial narrative that we heard from the activists was that this kid got in this man's face. You have just seen right now, it's actually the other way around. I went through the 2-hour live stream, I watched the whole thing, debunked a bunch of the fake claims. 500,000 views is a lot, but for some reason, when it comes to the mainstream narrative about correction, it's like these big companies can't see outside of their own bubble. So they don't know I exist. But the average person, like regular people, watch my content do. And so they watch me and they say, well, CNN's fake. And I'm not, are we surprised at all then to see MSNBC and CNN's ratings are in the gutter? Fox News got it right and their ratings are up.
We have this video of you on the Joe Rogan show. Why do you invite you?
That's a good question.
What is a woman? Can you tell me
Shout
that?
out Daily Wire. They can't tell you, bro. They don't know.
This is actually a really good story. So Joe Rogan had on Jack Dorsey and didn't really press him that hard on anything. It was kind of a boring interview. So I made a YouTube video where I just kind of addressed the criticism, and I was rather polite. I said, you know, I think we're better off that Joe did the interview, but admittedly, I just turned it off because it was boring and I wasn't learning anything. So the funny thing happened. Before I even published my criticism of Joe Rogan, it was nice, it wasn't so bad. I got a copyright claim from his company, claiming the rights to my video because it had a screenshot of his podcast, which is a mistake. Mistakes happen. Well, through a matter of coincidence, Joe had reached out to me recently to apologize for this, you know, something that happened in the past where he canceled on me. And so I sent him a message like, hey, would you mind releasing this copyright claim? I think it's an accident. You know, I produced a criticism of your podcast. He said, send me the link. About 10 minutes later, presumably after he watched the video, he said, hey man, I watched your video. It's actually pretty good. Can I call you right now? And so I said, sure. And then he talked to me on the phone, was kind of venting about how, you know, he was, you know, I screwed this one up. I wish I'd done a better job. Hey man, I owe you to come on the show. You know, we'll figure out some time. Thanks for talking. So I'm like, see you later.
Okay, there's kind of, whoa, that's a weird pause, Tim. I'm sorry. Let me fix your face for you, bro, so we don't leave you all. That's kind of some inside baseball, though, on him and Joe's relationship there. Got canceled on, but Joe seems to be a real one, even though he's coming around a lot slower than you think a real one would.
Later, I'm sitting in my pajamas, you know, playing some video games, about to go to bed. My phone rings, and he says, hey man, you want to fly out tomorrow and come on the show? And I was like,
And you're excited because Joe Rogan is really big.
I think he's a
Oh,
good
that's a
dude. I
big
think
deal,
he's
bro.
genuinely curious. He's kind of a calm
He's
and rational
legit.
figure. People really like that. You know, you watch an interview with someone on CNN, and they just all agree with each other, and it's very canned and scripted. You watch the Joe Rogan podcast, and it's 3 raw hours, and sometimes Joe pushes back, sometimes he doesn't. It's just, you know, interesting conversations. And often he talks about drugs, so I guess he has a lot of people who are really fascinated by kind of like a, you know, kind of a libertarian kind of culture where you can just chill, and I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, I guess.
You didn't confront Dorsey much. Dorsey shoved it off on the woman who handles these problems.
Wait, did Tim Pool just say Joe's popular because druggies like to watch him? Like, really? I don't. Oh, okay. That's a way to look at it.
Yeah, and this was the second appearance, right? So the first one was Joe saying, come on the show, let's talk about what I got wrong, you know, and love the conversation. And then following that, he said, how about we do, you know, he calls me on the phone, he's like, why don't we get, you know, Jack back in here and then I can have you talk to him. And it ended up being, there's a funny meme of it, like essentially that Joe and Jack were like, you know, essentially the coaches in the corner of the ring while they put me and Vijaya to like kind of duke it out over these issues. But, you know, she was the expert. Jack actually would defer. If I brought something up, he'd kind of point to her. But there are a few things that, you know, I would challenge him specifically on. Ultimately, I think Jack is kind of a figurehead. So the reason he brings on, you know, Vijaya is that she's the actual head of trust and safety, and Jack doesn't really know.
You want more people taken off Twitter?
Me?
Yeah, I seen that pop up recorded right April 2019. I figured this was older, because how they're talking about events like him suing, because that's
Yeah, I mean that's the
It's already
implication
rich,
of
bro.
what you're pushing with her.
In which capacity, though?
Covington
They weren't
boys, that
quick
is.
enough to take off the people who
Joe.
said, "Let's go get those kids killed."
Oh, the people who are sending death threats in violation of U.S. law. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I'm as close as free speech absolutist as you can get within the confines of the U.S. law and the opinions of the Supreme Court. Conveying over the internet that you want to cause harm to people or you're instructing people to do so is a bad thing, which should probably be taken down.
I would
Right.
think so too,
Right.
but already Twitter is cutting people for much less serious stuff.
And that's the real problem. You could say something as innocuous as men aren't women, and they'll suspend you, but quite literally post a picture of you decapitating the president, and it's no big deal.
What's that about? I mean, they don't say it's no big deal.
Well,
She's saying we actioned them.
what does that mean? The way I always explain is the analogy of, you know, how many grains of sand make a heap. If they're going to keep banning, it's not just conservatives. It's people who hold opinions outside of the intersectional feminist orthodoxy.
Because the
Correct.
censors at these companies are intersectional feminists?
Yes,
Yes.
I believe that's a fair assumption, although I don't want
at least the HR department.
to I don't want to act like I have absolute proof, but look, they're based in San Francisco. There's this prevailing ideology and orthodoxy that exists in these ultra-liberal areas that's typically referred to as the regressive left. They're people who they want race-based policy. It's called intersectional feminism or identitarianism. And so what ends up happening is when someone goes on Twitter and says something that's particularly racist, they'll ban you. Unless it's racist towards white people. They'll claim it's not racism at all because in their mind, you can't be racist towards white people.
You're a person of the left, but you say it's the right that gets picked on, and now you're defending the right.
And because of that, because I so often can see, because plain to anybody, they're biased against conservatives, that must mean I am a conservative, they claim, which is not true. I just, what happened to the liberals who defended free speech? What happened to the left protesting the Vietnam and the free speech era? What happened to the left at Berkeley holding up signs saying free speech? Today, the left shows up with torches and burns free speech signs. That's not the left.
It is the left. It's not the old left.
But this is what they're trying to do, and I refuse to let them. They want everyone to believe.
Because they weren't marching for free speech, bro. They were marching for the right to indoctrinate.
That someone like me, who is a supporter of Bernie Sanders, is a conservative. That way, actual conservatives look insane. But think about it. These people who show up burning signs that say free speech, by all metrics, are a tiny fraction of the actual population. There's a report called Hidden Tribes that show progressive activists are 8%. Of those, how many actually show up and wear masks and give on? It's a tiny fraction. But they want you to believe they are the left so that they can take the mainstream narrative and convince middle America, if you want to be on the left like you've been your whole life, support the people who throw Molotov cocktails and bash people over the head. I'm not going to stand for that. I do not stop becoming someone on the left simply because I have always supported free expression, free speech, opposed censorship. How is it, when I was growing up, it was the...
When did the right ever not support free speech? That's why I'm confused, though. Free speech isn't a left or right thing. That was just an everybody thing until it became a right thing. It wasn't a one side. Are we doing a fake of everybody switch sides bullshit? What are we doing here?
Religious conservatives that had the moral panic about music and swear words, but today the moral panic is coming from the left. I think there are, when people, they repeatedly put out this argument, like Ezra Klein tries claiming that people like me are reactionary right-wingers, which is absolutely insane, as if Ben Shapiro and I have policy positions in alignment. We don't. We absolutely disagree with each other.
Ezra Klein said what?
Ezra Klein, the founder of Vox, said that people like me, mostly Dave Rubin, are the new reactionary right because we oppose the progressives. But I'm going to tell you this.
Dave Rubin? I mean, he's all right, I guess, but a figurehead of the right? No.
If you've got people who opposed Hillary Clinton, who are still on the left, if you've got someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who recently in an interview said identity politics is dividing us, she's not a right-winger. Nancy Pelosi is not a right-winger because she criticized Ocasio-Cortez.
That was the worst picture of Tulsi I've ever seen.
This is a fringe faction of people who are aimless, protest themselves. I mean, there was a pride parade in Edmonton, Canada that was shut down because this fringe faction of regressive left protested gay pride. I'm pretty sure the staunch religious conservatives would be like, hey, we're glad you got the event shut down. We don't agree with that either. So it's not a left-wing position, but they're trying to claim it is. And so long as people in the mainstream media, and I'm guilty of this too, refer to this fringe group as the left, they will be the left.
You call yourself a person of the left, and you work at Vice, but now you're mostly criticizing the left.
Yeah, but it's mostly one particular element of the left, right? Most of my friends are Bernie Sanders supporters, excited to vote for him.
Now, switching sides, Vice switch sides. That's a side switcher. Side flipper. Switchy flipper. Flipper switcher.
I'm not as big as a fan of Bernie as I used to be. But what we're seeing now
Bernie,
is this really
bro?
strange faction
Oh, God,
on the left
dude.
that are saying
Literally,
ridiculous
a
things that make
Bernie,
no
bro?
sense.
Come
They're
on.
protesting themselves. They're hurting the left.
Come
when you look at what's going
on.
on in the political landscape, you go on Twitter and you see a conservative say something about a conservative opinion, you go, yeah, I get it. Conservatives have always been pro-life. They claim to want small government, all these things. It's their position. When you look over on the left, you'll see people saying that interracial dating is bad. Like the New York Times ran an op-ed where someone actually said they didn't want to be in an interracial. The Huffington Post did the same thing. Well, now all of a sudden, Middle America is looking at these two groups, and one seems to be split up. So at the very least, what I end up seeing is, if I want regular old socially liberal policy, like how the Democrats were 10 years ago, they believed in border protections, they believed in controlling for immigration. Who do I vote for? Because you've got all the top politicians now running the same rhetoric from, it's called identitarianism. When Bernie Sanders said on the 2016 debate stage, this blew my mind. Bernie Sanders said that white people didn't know what it was like to be poor. What does that mean? In fact, most people in this country who are poor are white. That's identity politics to the extreme, which is, a government-based identity, and that's when you start losing people. Have you seen a video of, conservatives wearing black masks, throwing Molotov cocktails, or bashing people over the head with crowbars? You don't. But you look at this protest in Portland, A Bernie Sanders supporter showed up with an American flag to protest against the fascists. That's what they say, the fascists. And so what did Antifa do? Cracked him over the head with a club, put him in the hospital with a concussion. You got a video out of Boston where a little old lady was carrying an American flag, showing up to protest who she thought were fascists. They weren't, but she thought they were because the press told them. They said, this is what's happening. What do you see in the video? This is actually on, I believe it was on Fox News. An anti-fascist protester runs up and tries ripping from her hands, and she falls, and he drags her across the ground. So what do you think happens when a 40-year-old dad or mom is watching the news and they see this and they think, that's the left, that's the Democrats? I don't want to be. That's crazy. That's violence.
Why do you want to cover protests?
For protests like the Columbia thing with Mike Cernovich, he's a contentious figure. You know, whether you like him or you hate him, he was one of the biggest people pushing Donald Trump. So he's going to give a speech at a school. There's going to be a protest. I want to see what the people have to say about him. Why don't you like him? What concerns you? And then, of course, God knows why. They start claiming I'm friends with him because I think at that point I interviewed him like one time, and so that's proof. That's proof. They've seen a video of me talking to him. I must be his friend. So then they just turn on me and start screaming alt-right and other nonsense, which is absolutely ridiculous, not true.
And are you nervous in that situation?
No way. Now, when I was covering Ferguson riots for Vice, I actually got shot at.
My favorite thing to do when I'm smoking.
Oh, you can hear though.
Sit in some nature, enjoy the sunlight.
You could hear that.
And there's video of falling to the ground and bullets. I was in Ukraine at the start of what became their civil war, whatever.
At Columbia. The college in this case supported you.
Sort of to the extent they needed to, I suppose. It's not like they shook my hand and said we love you or anything. They were just.
Notice they didn't go into that Ukraine civil war.
When people started screaming at me, this one young woman claimed that I was there to dox them, to film the activists so that white supremacists would hunt them down and hurt their families. And I've got an ID because I used to work for an ABC News venture. And so I'm showing my credentials to the press. I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And she's like, I'm so sorry, don't worry about it. Like, you're fine, you're allowed to be here. And I'm like, thanks. I just went about my business. They eventually gave up on me. They got tired. The Antifa de-escalation team, they actually called it, said don't touch him. And so they actually made sure people didn't touch me, which is good.
The Antifa de-escalation team made sure people didn't touch you.
Yeah.
Antifa has a de-escalation team?
I wouldn't,
no shit.
I guess you could call them Antifa. Typically when people refer to Antifa, it's usually the masked individuals who are starting fires and throwing stuff, but they all consider themselves to be a part of the anti-fascists or Antifa for short. And so yeah, when it comes to the standard protest, not the extreme riots, they have people who try and make sure nobody, no one from their side starts it because the cameras are rolling and they don't make them look bad.
And they call themselves the de-escalation?
Oh yeah. But I respect that at 100%. If you're going to organize a protest and there's a chance that some of your people are going to get out of hand, having designated people to stop that, nothing but respect for me. I'm just going to say even longer.
Nazi scum.
Well, they were yelling that about Cernovich, not me. It was actually really funny because one person in this crowd recognized me and started yelling about me, pointing at me, and all the protesters look around in confusion because they didn't know who I was. Because I'm not nearly Mike Cernovich, they don't know who I am. My political opinions are like centrist and really tepid, so I'm always omitted from any of the hit pieces.
They do now,
So these
bro.
protesters start getting confused, looking around, and then eventually point at the wrong guy who's just like some New York press photographer screaming at him that he's like alt-right or something. And then eventually someone's like, no, this guy.
Because you'd interviewed Cernovich.
I have no idea why some guy tried claiming that I was alt-right. But then someone comes up to my left and goes, hey, you're Cernovich's friend, right? And I'm like, no. I've met the guy one time, maybe. But this is what they do. It's really interesting. The way I describe it is that politics today only flows in one direction. If I sit down for an interview with Mike Cernovich, they will take that video and say, look, Tim Pool is right-wing, he's hanging out with Cernovich. But when I do interviews with Antifa or with communists, because I've actually interviewed a former Soviet general, they say nothing, they don't highlight it, or they'll claim the left-wing individual is now right-wing. Because, if I'm interviewing Cernovich and I'm right-wing, if they're with me, they must be right-wing too. It can only go one way, not the other way. Do you think that there's been more violent crime?
At the last 2 years, maybe.
Do you think that has anything to do with refugees?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Sweden was big.
I don't get what's going on there. Explain.
The Sweden trip was basically in response to Donald Trump. He had watched a segment from Fox News and then said, you see what's happening in Sweden last night? And then, of course, you have this, just wave of negative Trump press come out, where they're saying, Trump is wrong, what's he talking about? Instead of trying to understand what he was trying to convey.
Trump had said there are areas where you can't go.
He said last night in Sweden, and that was the quote, last night in Sweden. And then Sweden came out and said nothing happened last night, because he was referring to Fox News. So what ends up happening is there's this deeper story about places they call no-go zones. It's a colloquial term used by people all over the world. A lot of people in Sweden use it, a lot of people in America use it. And then what happens is, because no-go zone has an alternate meaning, which means areas that are under conflict where you can't go, you get people in the mainstream press or the left-wing media saying there's no such thing as a no-go zone in Sweden, ignoring the fact that it's just kind of a slang term used by people to represent troubled areas. And when you actually look at that, it turns out, yeah, the police call them problem areas. In fact, the police go there more often than anywhere else. But the reality is, they exist.
People go there, and it's kind of racist to call them a no-go zone.
I don't know if it's racist necessarily. This is where it gets complicated, right? Is the person calling it a no-go zone referring to the race of the individual or the religion? In which case, is it an ideological challenge? Is it a crime rate challenge?
You went there, and your videos.
It's being dragged into an alley and stabbed or graped. I think that's what you have to say on the internet now because truth is challenging. But yeah, it's a no-go zone because if you go there after dark, you get robbed. Unless you're me, I'll have a gun.
Said what?
That it was nuance.
Whatever zone
You got
I'm
lots of
in.
views with nuance?
Yeah, which is, here's what I think happens. The establishment, the corporate media, the big, long-standing corporations, they seem to have a narrative on these things. And because Trump said something, it must be the opposite. Well, the average person just wants some kind of honest take on it. You look at why YouTube is doing well. It's because the conversations tend to be longer, raw, unedited. So I go to Sweden, and you've got the conservatives saying it's a hell zone. Their cars are all flaming. It's really terrible. And you get the people on the left, liberals, saying no, that's fake news. You're lying. The reality is, crime is up. It's up quite a bit, but Sweden's crime is ridiculously low relative to the U.S. So here's what I think happens. If I told you crime was up 1,000%, you'd think, whoa, that's insane. It must be really bad. But if I tell you that they had, one murder in the past 5 years and it's up 1,000%, it's like, oh, how many murders is that now? It's a tiny fraction of what we see in any American city. So the conservatives, they'll hear, I think it was for the town of Malmo, crime was up, I think, 10 times. And people hear that and they get, wow, that's crazy. You then hear Swedes saying the murder is up so high, we're terrified. Well, yeah, if you live in a city where you've only ever experienced one murder per year, and then all of a sudden one year you have 13 murders, that's going to freak you out. People in the US then hear this from the panicked Swedes, and they associate it with Chicago or New York or Baltimore, and they assume that must be 1,000 murders. No, it's much nicer, much safer than most American cities, but they do have a problem with crime going up, mostly gang-related. But we've even seen, it was only, I think, a few months before I went there, somebody threw a grenade onto a balcony, killing a little boy. So they certainly have their problems. But, one side will have you believe it's the end of the world, and the other will have you believe nothing.
Wait a second. In one breath, you're like, it's no big deal. It was only 13 people. When they had one dude killed in the last 5 years, and now just people are dropping every other week, every few weeks. That's no big deal. Grenades being thrown onto balconies, killing children. And he's like, see, the right wing's going crazy. I mean, it's not even like a big deal. You say grenade and no big deal in the same sentence there, Beanie Boy?
Things happening at all.
All right, well, there it is. Tim Pool, John Stossel, Beanie Boy in action. Beanie Boy making it happen. Spewing, I don't know how to label, I don't like to label people, but in the first place. So we'll just say Tim is, he's Beanie Boy. Take care, guys.